packaging is more important than the actual pricing point. How you bundle your features, how you package the different functionality is more important than if you charge $10.99 or $12.99.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast, where we look to crack the code on growing your business by tackling the challenges to keep revenue leaders up at night. I'm Carl Ortmans, and on today's episode, we're going to dive into the most challenging topic, and this is my humble opinion, in business. That's pricing and packaging. Today's podcast is sponsored by Virtual Causeway. Traditional demand gen is breaking for a lot of teams that we talk to on the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. Virtual Causeway helps fix that by shifting from demand generation to demand positioning. Instead of chasing form fills, they engineer where and how your brand appears when buyers research through things like AI tools and peer networks. The result? Fewer cold motions, more high-intent conversations, and revenue teams actually spending time with people who want to buy. Check them out at virtualcauseway.com. And don't forget to mention the show for a special rate. Now, my guest today is Roee Hartuv. Roee didn't just come up through pricing spreadsheets or academic theory. He spent over 2 decades inside real go-to-market teams across sales, customer service, or success, I should say, and revenue leadership roles where he sees firsthand how growth breaks when pricing, packaging, and execution aren't aligned. What's shaped his perspective is seeing the same pattern over and over again. Teams working incredibly hard, shipping more features, hiring more people, and still leaving massive revenue on the table because pricing didn't reflect how customers actually perceived the value. Now, before focusing on pricing, Roee helped build and advise revenue organizations across SaaS, including leading go-to-market transformations at Winning by Design. Today, he's the senior pricing advisor and head of go-to-market experience or expertise at willingness2pay.com. Roee treats pricing as human-first problem. It's about understanding customers, what trade-offs, and how do you align the teams. He doesn't just look at it as a numbers exercise. Roee, welcome to the podcast, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So to get us kicked off, can you share a little context about your world? What industries or verticals do you work in today? What are your selling motions? What size companies do you work with?
Yeah, anything in B2B recurring revenue.
Okay.
Right? What does that mean? B2B, everybody knows recurring revenue is basically SaaS, but not necessarily SaaS. It could also be different recurring revenue models for hardware, for example, but these sort of type of companies. Mm-hmm. And we advise companies anywhere between 10 million and above.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then does it matter on segment? So if I'm PLG first, if I'm sales led, sales assisted, does it matter?
No, our approach and the models that we built are applicable across the different segments. And let's face it, most of the companies out there have a hybrid approach, right? So you cannot say I'm purely PLG. At some point, you will have direct sales. So yeah, we address it all.
Agreed. How we got to today's topic is I asked Roee, I said, hey, what's a successful revenue initiative you've ever led or existing challenge that you're solving or have solved? And without hesitation, he said, it's pricing and packaging.
Yeah.
And so in my opinion, pricing and packaging is the most challenging and also the most important one for businesses to solve. So let's start here as the kickoff. Why does pricing and packaging feel like the hardest growth lever to touch? And that's even when leaders know that it's broken or maybe outdated.
You're starting with the most complex question to answer, right?
Well, we might as well start with something juicy and see where it takes us.
Yeah. I think pricing and packaging is challenging for different reasons, but I would say the main reason is because it touches all the organization. Pricing and packaging is the baseline. It is the monetization strategy upon which you build the entire company on, right? Pricing and packaging, first of all, touches product. How do you build your product? How do you package your product? That's part of pricing and packaging, and that touches the product side of the business. Of course, go-to-market approach. How you want to position your market, it's something that you could do through pricing. How do you bundle the different features that the product team is developing and make them something attractive for the customers to buy? So that's the go-to-market team. We're talking about finance, right? Because you can design a model that's based on recurring monthly or quarterly type of monetization, and you also can do it by usage based. So it touches the finance team, it touches operations, of course. How do you actually bill and quote to cash for the different tools and offerings that you have? So that is the number one thing. It touches everything. And although I would say it's also challenging finding the right pricing and packaging, we'll talk about that probably, but then implementing that. And that is not unique to any go-to-market transformation project, but this is truly a complex, because again, it touches everything within the company. So how do you do change management? How do you introduce a new pricing and packaging? That is the two reasons I believe that it is really challenging, and most of the people struggle to do that.
So in that, I'm thinking about this in sort of a cyclical diagram. You start with the product, and then it goes to the go-to-market team to do some sort of trend. Tell me if I'm way off here. To go-to-market team to say, here's what we've done, this is what we're going to do. Then you go to the finance team to say, hey, by the way, these are the new things. This is the new forecast that we're going to be looking at. And then it goes to operations that's going to implement it. And then you're kind of in this cyclical flywheel.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's a good way of thinking about this.
We do it all together.
Oh,
because one influences the other. I can't decide on the product roadmap in a void without talking to finance and understanding what we promise the investors in terms of what's going to be the expected growth, because that influences the pricing and packaging and the cost structure and the unit economics that will thereby tell the product team what to focus on. So as part of our approach to pricing and packaging, I bring everybody in the same room. And okay, finance, what is the objectives for the next 3 years? What are the growth expectations? Product, what does that mean? How much resources do you have? What is under your roadmap? Go to market, sales team, is that aligned with what you currently have? Customer success, is that aligned with what our existing customers are expecting? So as part of our design process, we bring everybody in the same room and make those decisions and design the pricing and packaging based on all the considerations there.
Okay, which I love that idea, because you bring everybody to the table, everybody has a say, and you're focused on the same outcome, right? It's what's the revenue growth of the company and how do we get there by doing some up. So if we step back one second, because I would like to talk more about how your process operates. But if we go back to the challenge and sort of like in that loop that I was sort of describing, if we go back to that, and maybe there's a clue here for us to talk through, is in other organizations before they bring you in, are you seeing, or have you seen the mistake that companies make of, well, product did a thing and they think it should be sold at X and they just push it across? Or, hey, sales team is operating, they think that they can sell it for Y and they just start selling it and they don't talk to the operations team and the finance team, and then they come back and say, hey, sales, why did you sell this for X dollars when we priced it Y? Where's the disconnect at the first thing to maybe diagnose where you may have a trial, maybe where you have that first challenge?
Yeah. So first of all, let's start off. True pricing and packaging expert as a role within a company does not exist in the early days.
Right.
Like I see companies bringing in a pricing and packaging that's their role and their experience at 100 million ARR, maybe 250 million ARR. Before that, it changes from company to company, but who owns and who designed pricing and packaging? Usually no one owns it, and whoever designs it was, usually this is how it looks like, right? So you build an MVP And then, okay, I've got something. I need to go to market. Let's define a pricing and packaging. So we look around, what are the competition, and then we choose what is the pricing and packaging that is relevant for us. And who does that? Sometimes it's the founder, sometimes it's the product, sometimes we have a talented product marketing person, and they do that. Most of the times, we don't check our pricing and packaging. Focused on growth. We're focused on acquiring new businesses. We don't check to see what we learned, what changed in the market in order to update our pricing and packaging. So that is the problem. That's where, that's where we come in and say, okay, listen, you don't have that in-house expertise. You are based on decision that you probably did 5 years ago. It's time to update the pricing and packaging, and then we start to do it together. I would also say that most of our clients know that they have a pricing and packaging issue, so they come to us with that.
So what's the trigger for that? When somebody says, "Hey, Roee, I believe we have a pricing and packaging issue."
Yeah.
What do you consistently hear as like, "I know that we have an issue and we need to solve it for this reason"?
Yeah. So in a lot of cases, it's the executive team, the CEO knows that they're leaving money on the table. Like, I know I'm worth more than what we're actually selling at, but I don't know how to increase that. It could be because they're looking at the competition and saying, hey, they're charging 2 to 3 times more than we do. Like, why? Of course, I can raise my prices. That's easy, but is there a smarter way to do that? So that's the main use case that we come and help our customers. Everybody now is focused on AI, right? So you might have a legacy, like a SaaS, traditional SaaS product, and then either you want to integrate AI functionality within that SaaS, or you might have a native AI type of company. And they just don't know how to use that because we're all used to selling seats, right? That's a classical pricing metric or pricing strategy. How many users do you need? Okay, let's multiply by this number, and that's how much we're going to price you. But in AI, we know that that's different, and most companies now need to move into a consumption-based strategy, and so they don't know how to do that, and that's maybe the second use case that we often see. And more mature companies, when they do M&As and they want to integrate a new company or new product within their offering, how do we do that? So that's maybe the third most common use case we see.
So there's a few things you've said that I'd like to talk through before we get into the future state. And going back to the beginning, because you said who owns pricing and packaging early on, and it's the CEO, right? The CEO is the person that's the founders. CEO, they're setting the vision. This is what we believe. We're going to go from there. This is what we either raised money on the premise of, or this is where we want to get to.
Yeah.
Great. CEO knows it. They launch. Sake of simple math, we charge $10 a month for it. Well, the market that we're in, our competitors are charging $30 a month, and they're winning at a higher rate than we are. What is it that goes into that conversation to say we want to move up to that, closer to that $30 mark than where we are here? What does the conversation sound like between moving from 10 to 30?
Yeah. So first of all, what's the reason? Do you truly provide the right amount of value to your customers that could justify that $30? So it's all about value. So that's the first thing. Let's just analyze that. I just got off a phone with a client, and they were towards the end of the project, but they were like, we're literally charging a third of our competition, but we know that our product is much more superior. And that's why they brought us in, like, help us go and capture that additional value that we're providing that we're not charging for. So that's the first thing. And the second thing goes, and this is back to business school, how do we want to position ourselves in the market? I just ended another conversation the other day, and that company is like, we have a superior product, but we came and we're now competing against the companies that have been around for the last 10 and 15 years, and it's for us, it's all about market share. And the strategy that we discussed there is that, yeah, you want to have maybe an entry point, a pricing that is very competitive to start grabbing market share. But on the more advanced capabilities or jobs to be done, or the value that you provide, this is where we're going to charge premium. And that's the strategy that we decided on with that specific client.
It's interesting. I go back to a couple of experiences I've had in my career, and I won't say the company name. There is one company where the question is margin or market share. Which one do you want to chase? And you know, as you go through it, and I think it's maybe a question to ask, and maybe as a transition point here, just as we're talking, is are you going after high margins or are you going after high market share, or you're trying to go for market share?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it rarely happens where you can have really high margins and really high market share, but you also have to have the best of the best in the class.
Yeah.
And especially when you're in a competitive market. So at this time, we were priced at $250 for simple math. And the competitor, which was was gaining market share rapidly, was priced at 100. So we weren't looked at as the most innovative or have the best tech, but this $100 product that was coming up, and it was just constantly going and going and going, and we were looking at it like, well, what are we doing to offset that? Is that a part of the conversation with pricing packaging when you go into like, hey, we want to go after margins, or we have to go with market share?
Yeah, it comes up, of course. The problem is that most companies don't really know how to calculate their margins. So
really?
Yeah. Top line, yeah. They know how much money they're getting and how much money they're spending. But on an individual account, we don't know. Like, most companies don't know. You'd be surprised. A lot of time I spend with my clients is just understanding their cost structure and their unit economics. But I don't think it's surprising. Why? Because most SaaS companies out there are compensated, and valuation of a company is only on the growth of the top line. Whether you're profitable or you're not profitable, what are the margins? You don't really capture that. So that's the first thing. Now, back to your question. This does come up, and I just want you to bear in mind that if you build and structure your packaging correctly, you can play in both areas. And coming back to the example that I said earlier, we can have a core product that this is where we play on market share, but the margins we're going to make on the 10% of our premium customers, this is where we're going to make most of our margins. And again, when you look at different companies, and yeah, numbers vary, but a lot of the companies, especially the ones that are addressing mid-market and enterprise segments, yeah, most of the revenue, most of our margins come from those 10, 20, 30% of those big accounts, and the rest, the long tails, the margins are usually smaller.
And all the things that would come in from the margins would be, how often are we operating with the customer? What's the value? What are the services we're providing? There was a group that I remember working with, and I think I told this on the podcast, but it was like the person paid $100 a month for sake of discussion, but we were spending, the cost to maintain that customer was like 10x, because they were just constantly in support. They were talking to salespeople. So the time required and the amount of time spent with that customer for $100 a month was so far superior than the customers that were paying us $250,000 a month. And it was a totally different offset. So we had to shift. But it was a good exercise to go through.
Yeah. But Carl, show me How many companies do you know that are out there that are measuring that on a customer level?
Hmm.
Which segments are we profitable on? Which segments we are not? Which customers, accounts? Where is the break point, right? The ones that, above a certain threshold, this is where we start making money. Show me a company that deliberately made the decision to stop serving specific clients or segment because they're not profitable.
It
I've
doesn't
worked
happen
with
often.
companies and it doesn't happen. Yeah, rarely
Really?
happens. Yeah, only the big ones capture that they have a very big finance team that are actually able to capture the costs and allocate that to the customer, to the specific accounts. Yeah.
That's an interesting exercise to go through because I've had the fortunate ability to go through it a couple of times. The pricing and packaging one I think is fascinating. I'll maybe give you a little anecdotal there, and to maybe jump into it. But in this conversation, the whole notion of like, what's the cost to acquire a customer? We should know that should be something most companies
That is
should be able to know, right? CAC to LTV.
Yeah.
What is it?
Yeah.
But then the cost to maintain a customer,
Cost to serve. Yes.
cost to serve. Well said. Better than I said. The cost to serve, is that a missing component for pricing and packaging when you get into these conversations?
Yes.
Okay.
95% of the time they don't have that.
So I don't know if I've had the fortunate opportunity, because there was one group that that I worked with, and we went through and we looked at it and we said, you know what, we're going to make a conscious decision to say, if you're paying less than $100 a month, you take this you're taking a self-service approach. We'll respond to you. We'll do it. But we had to change our rules because we found exactly that. Our support team was spending more time with people that, and I don't mean this negatively, but they shouldn't, because the value and the cost that they were giving us, the value they were getting, the cost they were giving us, and the cost for us to maintain, it was just out of whack.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like, well, what did we do? So we made that conscious decision to say, these customers are the ones we're going to operate. But it takes me back even to, I think I may have said this, but like Zoom is a great example. I have a Zoom license, and I took Chief Customer Officer school in Pavilion, and I was trying to I asked the question multiple times, and I didn't get the answer. But in a PLG to a sales motion, right? When you go to the board and you talk about your renewal rate and the churn rate, etc., and maybe churn comes into the pricing packaging, we'll get there. But I said, for me, I was trying to ask the question of, what is the number you look at? Do you separate the two and say, hey, you're a PLG, you're an enterprise, or you're sales led versus PLG led? And I didn't get the answer, but there's something there. If I'm a PLG, like if I canceled today, Zoom wouldn't care. Like they just wouldn't, right? I'm just a one person, one seat, no big deal. Yeah. But if they had somebody pick a major company, I don't know, Apple, right? If they had Apple was using Zoom, if they lost them, it's a very different conversation.
Yeah.
So as you're building the pricing and packaging, maybe this is where my question comes. Are you also encouraging these companies to design their journeys based off of what the cost is that they're paying, or the journey they went? Meaning, I came in, I filled out a form on your website, I entered my credit card, I didn't speak to anybody. You've now determined you're self-serve, you're just tech only.
Yeah.
You came through, you filled out a form, you want to talk to somebody, great, you're here. This is now your journey. Do you advise on considering those factors when you're building your pricing packaging models?
Yes. We segment the different, not only by the potential willingness to pay, but also geographies, industries, right? Some industries are willing to pay more, and then they deserve better support, better CRMs, not self-serve. So yeah, definitely do that. But Carl, to your point, you didn't get an answer in Pavilion, but I'll give you an answer. Of course, Zoom differentiate them. Every PLG company differentiates the PLG and the enterprise, because every company that does PLG at some point hits a plateau. There is an end amount of individual licenses that Zoom and Monday and Asana and Atlassian, and MongoDB, all these companies have a ceiling. And that's why all of them at some point move to selling to enterprise, because this is where the money is. If you read any one of these companies' investor deck, a quarterly investors report, you would see that they focus on enterprise. This is their number one KPI. That how many enterprise accounts were we able to onboard in the previous quarter? This is their number one KPI. This is how they are measured. So definitely they differentiate the two. And just, yeah, I love talking about this, but last comment here. Slack, now part of Salesforce.
Yep.
The way that Slack capture pipeline is by sitting on the self-served list of customers. And if they see, this is talking to Slack people, and if they see that, it automatically populates, right? So if the machine sees more than 3, 5, I don't know what the number is, of users with the same ending, like with the same from the same company, that automatically generates an opportunity for the enterprise team to start selling into that company.
Which is really smart because you leverage the technology. Mark Roberge was on recently, and we actually talked a little bit about Slack and how the measure of success of product market fit is one thing. And, he said, let's just say, for sake of discussion, I'm paraphrasing, but, was Slack's goal to say we're going to get to 1 million in revenue, or was a better measure of product market fit to say we want to have 2,000 people sending 5,000, whatever the number was, messages per month? He's like, he's like, I just think that's a better measure of product market fit because you have people actually using the thing versus I want to get to a revenue target.
Yeah.
Getting to that revenue target is maybe the next sort of evolution in this conversation. I've used the term of and maybe tell me if I'm way wrong because I'm learning from you. I like the analogy of a rubber band of elasticity with pricing and packaging. And actually, I had Doug Landis, if you've ever heard of Doug Landis, he's been on the podcast, and he said, actually, what's the willingness to pay of a company? And I was like, willingness to pay, interesting. So now that you have willingness-to-pay.com as like your thing, it's like, very cool. But is there something with the elasticity or that willingness to pay term when you're starting your pricing package, you say, look, we're going to put something, and then we're just going to keep stretching that rubber band to see the willingness to pay until there's that impetus where the band snapped. Okay, don't go too far. You've now hit your ceiling.
No, I don't think that's our approach. Our approach is around willingness to pay and trying to uncover willingness to pay, which one of our top philosophy is that we need to price the customers and not the product. And think about what that means. We're not pricing the product like, okay, it costs us 10 euros to add another account, and thereby we're going to charge them 15. We're going one client that has a bigger willingness to pay, we're going to charge them 20, and the other one 15, and the third one maybe 22 because they have higher willingness to pay. Right. I don't think we're doing like an elasticity until it breaks kind of analysis. We really try to see and collect signals of how much the market, the different segments, the PLG ones compared to the enterprise, the North American clients compared to the European clients, how much each segment is willing to pay, and their pricing based on that.
Okay, let's go a little more there. When you're trying to test your willingness to pay, so you have your PLG. Simon Drexler talked a lot about the validated learning loop, and I think it's maybe topical of write out your hypothesis, test it, success or no success, but you got to write it down, and that validated learning loop.
Yeah.
When you're whether or not while you're doing it or some of the mistakes or the challenges you've seen from companies. Is there anything to this where I'm going to take 10 customers in the enterprise segment? I'm going to test it. Do I put an A/B test on my PLG page? How do I start to think about implementing that shift of I realize I need to update my pricing and packaging. So I'm going to make a little bit of a change. Where does that start and where does it begin?
Yeah. I'll come back to where it begins shortly.
Okay.
I'll start off where it ends.
Okay.
It ends with our most valuable, highest paying customers converting to the new pricing and packaging, because this is our biggest risk, right?
Yep.
If I have a set of customers, the ones that are paying me the most are probably the most important to me, because if I lose any of them, it has a big impact on the revenue. So this is the end of the process. So that is the end goal. And everything that I do is I'm lowering risk to be able to come to a point in time to go to my most important clients and tell them, hey, we're changing our pricing and packaging, and the impact is going to be a 40% increase, a 400% increase on pricing. So that is the end goal. How do we get there? So
that's the question of like, how do you have that conversation? Does that conversation happen of the executives meet, like you have a big team that goes and says, look, Roee, you are our most important customer.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we've done is we've made huge investments in our technology stack, and we've done all of these things over the course of this year. You've been with us for 3 years, and we can't say thank you enough. But the realization for us is we've spent more than $5 million to invest. We now have to raise our prices.
Yeah.
We want to have that. Is that the Is that how that conversation happens, or what would you? How does that test or that hypothesis to go to those customers? What does it even sound like?
All right. How do we get there, and what do we do on those calls?
Right.
How do we get there? So that's the biggest risk, our biggest accounts.
Right.
Start off, we design, let's say, the pricing and packaging, and then we do internal validation. Usually we have a lot of smart people that engage with customers, and we want to validate the new pricing and packaging that we created with a small group of people. So we take it out, we do internal validation, and we get some feedback, pushbacks, challenges, etc. Once we're comfortable with that and we believe that we're ready, we go and do external validation. And external validation is talking to our trusted customers, the one that are on the customer advisory board or whatever that might be, product advisory board, and tell them, hey, we just want to get your honest opinion. We're evaluating our pricing and packaging. Let us know what you think about this. And we take them through an interview that we developed, like, how do we run this, and get their honest opinion. If we have built something correct, usually they will agree with our approach. And what we want to hear is, it makes sense. And then we usually get to the price increase towards the end. Nobody likes to have their price increased, but usually those interviews are, this is, I understand the logic, makes sense, seems reasonable. Oh, and this is the price? Well, that's maybe a bit too high, or we don't like that. But all the rest sounds good. Okay, and that's the only exception. Like the last question is usually around price, and there we expect to get some friction. So we did that in a closed environment with our trusted customers, and then we take it out to the field. And depending on the size of the company, if it's a small company, we just roll it out and test it out. And we start looking at feedback and pushbacks and looking at win rates and reasons lost. We, of course, enable the sales team to sell to the new pricing, talk about value, etc. In bigger organizations, we might start off with, as you said, A/B testing. But A/B testing, let's take maybe one segment, one industry, one geography, maybe our best sellers. Let's prove to ourselves that it works, and there are customers out there that are willing to pay the new pricing and packaging. And once we get that successful indications, then we know that the market is accepting our pricing and packaging. And then we can start rolling out and migrating our existing customers to the new pricing and packaging. And here too, we might segment it. We might go to the long tails, maybe smaller deals, until we build confident enough to go to our biggest customers, because we've tested out, and it usually a few months, right? It has passed since we've done that. And we are confident that we sold to a similar company that is in the same space, same size, and they accepted our pricing and packaging. There's no reason our existing customers not to accept that.
Hmm.
And you're right. The way that we have these conversations is, yeah, we invested 5 million and we need to charging for that. But maybe a better approach is like, look, you've been with us for 3 years and we value our partnership. But over the last 3 years, we have rolled out, and all companies do that, new features. So you're actually getting much more value today than the value that you signed up for on the pricing of 3 years ago. And it's time for us to update our pricing to reflect all the value and the capabilities that you're now getting. And usually that is easier to swallow. Now, there are different types of other ways to talk about price increase, but that's the main reason. Okay, it's time for us to update because the product has developed over time.
Okay, if we can talk a little bit the when, and then when to change, and then if we talk a little bit just before, and then we'll shift into something else. But when should companies be thinking about changing their pricing? Like, is it when you start launching new features, new products? Like, when should they start to think about that new evolution or that new journey for pricing and packaging?
Yeah. So as you constantly develop your product and hopefully deliver more value, this is my personal belief is that you constantly need to think of pricing and packaging. Coming back to the problem that we stated in the beginning, most companies set their pricing in the beginning and then just forget about that. Nowadays, I believe that pricing is more of an iterative process, and as the market changed rapidly, right? Recently, we've seen everything that is happening. Product development is always happening, and thereby I believe that we should always think about pricing and packaging. But we need to look at it in terms of cycles. So either you think and you follow your product launch or product update cycles or the sales cycles, and that's basically how you should look at it.
Okay, so what I heard is you said I should revisit my product, because there's the natural question of when should I change, and then the question is like how often. And so what I think I heard you say is I follow my development cycle or my sales cycle to revisit my pricing. Did I hear that right?
Yes. So when, always, and what are the cycles? These are the cycles. Because the market always changes. Your product hopefully always changes and adds more features, more functionality. Your competitors are always changing. And I believe, again, coming back to the first question, pricing and packaging and the monetization strategy is the base and the foundation upon everything else is built on.
Interesting. I took a course again through Pavilion. They're a good source of learning for me. And there was somebody who taught pricing and packaging and said you should revisit your pricing and packaging every 6 months was the guidance that they gave us. Because, and maybe there's a question here, is there an average of how long it takes for companies to revisit their pricing and packaging?
Again, I've never tested it, but usually it's 3 to 5 years.
Okay. So that goes back to your comment of like, I think we're leaving money on the table is a gut feel. And now you actually have to go back to the product team, the go-to-market team, the finance team, the operations team, get the whole team together and bring it in, right? Okay. So how often how often, depending on your product cycle or your sales cycle, revisit it. So there's an interesting clue there. The other thing that we've talked a little bit about, and I just realized we're almost 40 minutes, so I promise you I'd get you out of here within an hour. Sorry, Roee. This has been really interesting. There's a shift, you said, from seat-based to usage-based.
Yeah.
How is that journey going?
Tough for everybody.
How come?
Because pricing on usage is tough. You can't predict. You can't predict the costs, and most of the markets, the buyers out there don't like it because, again, the lack of visibility and predictability. And when you think of it, Salesforce launched their sales agent 6 months ago, 8 months
Yeah.
ago, and they changed their price 13 times since then.
13 times they've changed.
Yeah. OpenAI, we know OpenAI. That's one of the most successful company out there. OpenAI changed their pricing 10 times in the last 12 months. And we just recently, a week ago, they introduced a new tier, a new package. So we know freemium, pro, and enterprise. Or I think that it's called enterprise. We know they're losing money on freemium. That's obvious. And they also said that they're losing money on pro and enterprise. OpenAI is losing money on every of the account because for them it's getting market share. So they introduced the latest change. They introduced a new package, which is I think $8.90 a month. I forgot how they called it, and getting ads. So they introduced a new package. So all these companies are also struggling to figure out what is the right pricing and packaging, and they're testing it out. Will the customers agree to advertisement, etc.? What is the pricing? 20, they're locked at 20. They haven't changed it. So that's everybody's struggling right now. And it also supports the notion that I said earlier that we need to iterate. We need to change our pricing and packaging and think of it like agile development. I don't want to take it to the extreme, but yeah, we need to think of pricing as agile as well.
The one that I've seen a lot in the news, and maybe this is a good one as an example, is Netflix. So when I signed up for Netflix, I think it was like $9.99 a month. Now I think it's like $29.99 a month or something.
And they're fantastic. They're a classical use case of a company that keeps on adapting and changing. And I think in terms of pricing and packaging, they're doing a fantastic job. This is a school for pricing and packaging.
Okay. How come?
Because if you see the graphs of how much they're charging, they got us all used to their price increase, as you said. Like, first of all, they have a great product, and they took it from $9 to $29, and they added additional packages in between. And I think, when I want to talk about a successful company, that although it's in a B2C context, but they are doing a fantastic job in terms of pricing.
So Netflix didn't only have their book, Netflix break all the, their no rules book of Netflix and the culture, and now to this. Interesting. There's maybe a business case. Maybe we should be paying more attention to Netflix and the way they're working.
Although I do have some from my go-to-market advisory experience, the book I think is an outlier. Like when you think of it, what she wrote in her book, Breaking All the Rules, is that you need to hire exceptional people, and you just need to let them
get out of
be,
there.
and you don't need to create processes and confine them in a process. And my approach is completely different, because not all of us are Netflix, and not all of us sit in Silicon Valley and can hire the best of the best.
Right.
And most companies out there need to hire normal people. And when you hire normal people, you need to give them handbooks and playbooks and give them rules and guidelines, etc., which is contradictory to what she said in her book. But that's a separate conversation.
I shared with Roee, I said, wherever we go, after the first question is where we go. And it's my curiosity and sorry fatigue. Okay. Let's try to get us to, so we talked about some of the challenges. We gave some examples today around like the things to be looking at. As somebody's thinking about this, like, what does the new world look like? What's the advice that you would give, hey, if you're going to redo your pricing and packaging, as I like to say, everybody likes new, nobody likes different. When you do both at the same time, it can either cause friction or uncertainty. And I don't know if that statement could be any more true than pricing and packaging, because it's new and it's different. What would you advise people on a couple of 2 or 3 actionable things for them to look at, going back to what you said at the beginning, bring everybody into the room, etc. What would you suggest that they either look at or do if they're going to go through an upgrade or I don't want to say a rollover or a new world for their pricing and packaging? So what are the things that you would advise them to do if they're going to improve that?
All right, let's start off with the first one, which we already covered. Price the customer, not your product.
Okay.
Look at how much your customers are willing to pay and then define your pricing based on that and not looking at your product. So that's the first thing. Second thing, in principle, we covered that as well. Iterate, learn, iterate, improve, iterate. It's not a one-time thing, done, and then move on to the next thing. This is my approach on pricing and packaging. But maybe let's add a third thing here, which is new that we didn't discuss, is that packaging is more important than the actual pricing point.
Okay.
How you bundle your features, how you package the different functionality is more important than if you charge $10.99 or $12.99 a month.
Okay.
How you build and package the functionality, if you build it around value, then it makes the entire sales process much easier. So instead of the salespeople focusing on features and functions, they focus on packages around value. And the customers, yeah, I get it. This is the job I'm trying to do. That is the package that is right for me. And yeah, if I understand the value, I wouldn't necessarily mind if it's $10.99 or $12.99.
Which does bring a question of how many packages should I actually have? And I should have asked this earlier on, but it was more of like the challenge. I've heard some people say, hey, you should have 3, like a good, better, best as a good example.
Yeah.
Then there's others that have like 5 packages. Some have, 4. What's the best? And maybe it's company specific, but what's the best advice to say, hey, if you're going to do your pricing and packaging, your packaging specifically, you should have 1 tier, 3 tiers, 5 tiers?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Most common are 3 tiers, but I would say, yeah, to your point, it changes from company to company or industry, etc. And again, package around values, the value that you provide, and jobs to be done. So every package needs to address a different jobs to be done the customer has to do. And if you are selling to different segments, that each segment or different users, that each one of them has a different jobs to be done, then you might have multiple packages. But if you're selling just one jobs to be done, I have mono type of product and it's all just one jobs to be done, then you probably have one package.
I like that. Package for the jobs to be done, not the price. Yes. That's really cool.
Yeah.
Well, it also comes back to the willingness to pay. How much would you be willing to pay if I can offset some of the jobs that need to be done?
That's right. That's right.
That's awesome.
And if you understand that relatively fast and easy, then you're probably going to have an easier sales process.
Roee, I looked at, we're at 50 minutes right now. This has been awesome. If you can't tell, I'm curious about this one. I appreciate you answering all of my questions, and I do got to get you out of here because I think you have something next. We've already kind of given the 2 or 3 actionable things, but stepping into the next thing, if somebody says, hey, I'd like to know more, or I'd like to talk to Roee, where would you suggest people connect with you or look to connect with you, basically?
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm very active there, so
okay,
reach out or just follow me because I think I write interesting posts and insights that I gather from working with different companies. So yeah, that's where I am.
Awesome. Roee, we've only had the opportunity to meet recently, like as of this week. So everybody, hopefully they understand that we don't have a background. We were introduced, but I very much enjoyed our conversation and your perspective. Like, you've brought a different way of thinking about this challenge, and I very much appreciate you sharing your insights and allowing me to learn from you. thank you for doing this today and being with me and allowing me to learn. It's been a lot of fun.
My pleasure. I learned as well, and thank you for having me.
Well, and that's going to wrap up another episode of the Revenue Problem Solvers podcast. I'd like to thank Roee for sharing these incredibly invaluable insights. There's some clear strategies you can put into action today. Remember, success leaves clues, and every revenue problem has a solution. Sometimes you just need the right conversation to find it. Until next time, it's Carl with the Revenue Problem Solvers, helping you turn your obstacles into opportunities. Thank you for investing your time with us today. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.